Okay, so I'm going to be creating a video based off of Monet's water lilies. Specifically, I'm going to be doing his water lilies from Lingerie was a war memorial. Specifically because it's really interesting and I think the story is really cool and it's beautiful. I'm going to, I think, be using I'm going to put on screen the name of it because I can't say it. I know myself. I did take French for like 4 years in high school, middle school. I have no memory of like most of it. I can't remember all the pronunciation and all that, so I like that one because I think it's very classic Monet water lilies. It's just beautiful. That's going to be the inspiration. I'm going to be doing also some talking about the history of it, so let's get started. Basically, to start out, it was made between the years of 1914 and 1924. It was created as a war memorial by Monet. It was also his last work able to ever create before he passed away. I think it's also very interesting that he was actually in retirement at this point. He wasn't doing art. He hadn't painted in like, I think 3 years at that point. So he was retired. He had been seeing all of his friends dying. He had been seeing one of his sons die. He was just depressed and seeing it as though he was past that point in his life. He was in retirement when Georges Clemenceau actually came. First of all, this man was like about to become the prime minister, and one of his first priorities was going to find Monet in his retirement and be like, hey, we need some really good artwork. This is going to heal the nation and it's going to work great, so I need you to start working again. Charmed him into going back in. They were friends for like most of their life since they were young adults, so they had known each other for a long time. But he was also a politician. He was also a newspaper editor, and then later he was the prime minister of France during World War I. He was also like to lead France to victory, which is insane. And he was also like being like, hey Monet, what's up? He was part of the reason why we even have any of these, because if it would have been up to Monet, he wouldn't have painted again. He was done. He was over it. And I think that's fascinating that he was able to be encouraged by one of his oldest friends. And because also he was seeing all of his friends, family, people he was like created the Impressionist movement for dying. Because it was nearly, I think, 40 years later after that French, what was it? 40 years since the group exhibition with like Monet, Manet, Renoir, Astre, Zola, since that happened. So, and there was so many more movements. This was like during Cubism and Futurism and even Dadaism at certain points. And so all of these great art movements were the new ones, and Impressionists weren't seen as this great art movement. It was just normal now and accepted, honestly. So he went from seeing his artwork as being controversial and unacceptable and like rejected from the Paris fucking studio or whatever it's called, and then now he's just boring. And that's insane to me. I think that's fascinating. So he was doing that. So during World War I, Georges Clemenceau, he was leading France, but he was also making sure that Monet had all of his cigarettes and paints. He made sure during an era where there were very strict rations for all of France, but he made sure that Monet, because he truly believed that this will help heal the nation, and these are going to be great paintings, he wanted to make sure he had his cigarettes and paints while a war was going on. And also, while Monet was painting, the war was like not that far away. He could hear the gunfire, he could hear the trench warfare from his water lilies, his garden. And so he could hear all of this happening to his people, and this monstrosity is happening not super far away from him, whereas like I feel like if you're in Paris, you're more further removed from what's happening, so you can kind of like pretend, which I think is the case in a lot of ways for a lot of people, especially as an American. So I think that's fascinating too, as like an American who all of the warfare since pre my parents being born, before my grandparents were born actually, have not been on American soil. So we are this like weird removed from it, whereas with even Monet, he was there. He was hearing it. He also had a stepson was on front lines, and then his son was called to service in 1915. So he had his family on those front lines while he's hearing these front lines. And so basically it seems like he kind of used these water lilies as therapy, understandably, to work through the trauma that he's hearing and experiencing. He's like lost most of the people in his life, so he's just like, okay, now that I'm working, I am getting this done. I am putting all of my fucking shit into this, and this is my therapy, because it is 1914 to 1924, 10 years. There's not talk therapy at this point in our lives. At 1917, when the war ends, he had finished, I think, 2 of the paintings, or had like definitely decided there's gonna be 2. So he was also like, he was working, but he wasn't working like intensely. He was more leisurely, I would say, because those 2 paintings, after he talked to Clemenceau, ended up being goddamn 8 paintings, because Clemenceau convinced him to do 8 paintings. Part of that was because he, like, Clemenceau actually had this, like, fucking rift with Rodin, which I think is hilarious, because Rodin did a bad sculpture of Clemenceau, and he felt pissed, and so he was like, first of all, I want my shit to be better than fucking Rodin, because I don't like that man. Also, I'm going to make your ego kind of spike a little bit by insinuating, like, hey, Rodin donated all of this shit and created the Rodin Museum and made his legacy really great. What if we did the same? It was kind of part of the purgement, I would say. Also probably therapeutic, it's good for him, but also like a little bit of that ego of like, how are you gonna be remembered by these people of France? This is the gift to France. We just went through a fucking insane war of trench warfare, and like all of our young men are traumatized. What if you made us paintings? So it ended up being 8 paintings. That's how the Lingerie became a museum, was for these paintings specifically. And so the architect Camille Lefauve, I don't know, I probably pronounced that wrong, but I'll put it on the screen as well. He was the architect of it, and he designed it specifically for the paintings, for their size, for their measurements, all of those things. But the problem was, he didn't want to fucking relinquish it. When he was getting closer and closer to finishing it, he kept being like, no, I'm not done. He even, to the point, couldn't finish it. For example, the setting sun was actually never finished. It took him over 2 years to paint. And there's still, the right-hand corner is still unfinished. You can see the brush strokes and stuff like that, because it kind of seemed like at a certain point, he'd been working on these for 10 years. His wife was dead. The cataracts really were, I feel like, a big influence too, of like, this is what's keeping him going. This is giving him motivation and work and passion. And he actually died with Clemenceau actually holding his hand. He was at his bedside. Again, it wasn't just like Clemenceau being a dick. I think a little bit like was manipulating him to do that. But also, one, he truly did believe that art can be very healing, and he truly believed that it can help the people of France. Again, he's the prime minister. He literally fucking was negotiating at the Versailles, the trial of Versailles, I think it is. And he was literally there negotiating what they would get from Germany, the power, all of this, like all of that. He was negotiating all of that, but he literally couldn't get Monet, him to be done, and he couldn't, and I think that's fucking hilarious. Monet died in December 5th, 1926. He was 86 years old, so he actually lived a very long life. Also, mind you, he was living in Montmartre during the fucking 1800s, late 1800s. He was an artist. He was like going to the Moulin Rouge. He was living not like a casual, like, I'm gonna eat my veggies, I'm gonna go work out regularly. He was living it up. He was not being too casual. Yes, he had a family, his wife. Pretty sure he cheated on his wife, like a lot of artists, especially of that time, did. Once he died, that's when his artwork was given to Clemenceau, and they were able to create the exhibit. Once the exposition was ready to be showcased, then they were able to bring it out. So let's just talk about a little bit of the paintings. So they were all the same height. Every single canvas was the same height, but they were all varying lengths. Altogether, they accumulated about 300 feet of the length of it. And I think it was like 2 or 3 rooms of the expositions in this like oval shape. The museum was specifically created to showcase these artworks as a gift to France, as a gift for remembrance. It took 60 sessions for all of them. Up to 15 layers of paint was from his layering techniques. He worked on them also simultaneously. They were all on different wheels, and they were wheeled around into this huge art studio. So he had also this art studio specifically for these artworks, because they were larger than anything he's ever created. It was also a huge undertaking for him, because he hadn't created in this larger scale before. Now, there's a lot of theories by that. One, because of the grandness of it, but there's also this whole thing that he also had been suffering from cataracts. So what happens with cataracts, it kind of creates this like especially with age related cataracts. Apparently it creates this like kind of yellowy film on your eyes, so you can't see saturation nearly as well. So your difference of color is a lot dimmed and yellowed hue. Like if you put a yellow glass or color in front of you, then that's kind of more of what he saw. So a lot of these pieces are a lot of more desaturated and than his previous paintings. If you look at them, they have a lot of this blue and green hue, which is assumed that he was overcompensating that difference in saturation and color and hues in other paintings from other eras of even the water lilies, because there's tons of paintings that he created of the water lilies in his garden. If you look at like ones of similar areas, they're very vastly different in the hues he used, and it's a lot calmer. Also using larger scale helped his eyesight see better, and it's more in his face, more aware of what he's looking at. Part of the way that he painted these paintings was in layers upon layers. So there was like up to like 15 layers of paint, and so between sessions on each painting, he would also, since they were on wheels, he would also move them around depending on what he was working on, so that it could dry and flake and whatever, and so that way he could paint more layers on it later to get that textural, almost ridging effect, which makes it, for the point being of that, it was made not in a two-dimensional mind, it was made to be seen in person. I think that's why it's important to see art if you're able to in person, because a lot of these great artists, seeing the different brushstrokes in person or not being able to is a lot more impressive than seeing a photo of it, because you could just see the amount of work and time that was put into the paintings and how much hours and hours and hours of work. Again, he worked on these 8 paintings, or I think he had 12 technically, but 8 for the exhibition I think he worked on. But because of that, he was constantly rotating, so you can see the amount of work and time, because he worked on these for 10 years. Also with his paintings, he did a very interesting weave where the weft, which is this one, and the weft was much thicker than the weave, so it created this also extra little bit of texture where paint can kind of go into the grooves, and he leaned into that, and he actually did several layers of underpainting before he did his painting on top, his actual colors and things like that. His underpainting was purely just to create that texture to paint on top of. It's much more sculptural in my mind, and I feel like sometimes with 2D paintings they can feel very flat, especially if you only see the images of them. Even like non-impressionist painters even predate that, more romanticism and things like that, where they create a lot smoother, or even more Renaissance, when that was the entire ideal, was just not see any brushstrokes. Seeing that in person is so fascinating. Again, go see real art. It makes a difference. It look, in my opinion at least. Again, not an expert. I just like art. I've never taken a single art history class in my life. I've taken a lot of art classes. I also think just even from just looking at the paintings, I think it's insane to think that he didn't really do any, like, his techniques weren't very like rubbing and like blending or anything. It was very much dotting, striping, layering, and it ends up with this kind of feel that there is this beautiful blend to it and connection, and you're able to see it's impressions of it. Again, that's why I love the Impressionist era, because you can tell what it's meant to be, but they do it in such a unique and individual way, and each Impressionist, including Monet, has a very unique sense of style that's very much their own, and they're not trying to imitate anyone else, and they have inspiration. I think that's the difference between inspiration and copying in a lot of ways, at least in my opinion for art, is that when you can tell that's like inspiration for other people, but they use that to create their own and really cultivate their own sense of style. And if like seeing that sense of style grow as you do it more, but it also still stays true to their own sense of point of view, I think is beautiful. And I think Monet is a really good example of that, of staying true to your sense of style and techniques that work for you, but learning to encourage it and get better at it, and finding better, more unique ways to make your beautiful pieces the way you want to make it, and refine your own sense of techniques. Because I think that's truly what creates great artists, is you find your own technique and you find joy from what you're creating, and therapy in a lot of ways, I feel like, because it's shown that there's a lot of the great artists out there were not mentally well. and we're not doing well. So I think that can also show that, like, hey, this can be a form of therapy and self-help. Like, even with, like, I'm not going to go into too much of a tangent, but even with Van Gogh, sheer numbers of works that he created when he was in sanitariums, in mental health areas, usually his upswings were during, a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times were during when he was doing well and functioning a little bit better than maybe he was in the past. So I think that can also be a beautiful thing of, one, just healing yourself through this artwork, and your entire goal is to do better for yourself. Like that self-internal encouragement versus external encouragement, which I think Monet did get that external encouragement, but it was kind of like, come and so, I'm sorry, but it was kind of in a manipulative way of being like, how are you going to be remembered? How's France going to remember you? Do you want something that's going to last for generations and everyone's going to look to and be like, what an amazing man, how talented. So it was that, but he also used it as a way to, again, he lost his wife, he lost children, he saw death and massacres happening not far from his home. I think it was hitting a little bit closer to home. He was still a privileged white man, but I think it also was a form of therapy for him. And I think that's just beautiful and amazing, because if you do look at it, again, this is very much a point of view that I got from the amazing YouTube channel Great Art Explained. I think highly recommend, if you're going to listen to anyone about these, it's that channel, because they do an amazing job. That's where I get a lot of my information from. I also looked at the Orangerie website. They also have more information too, a little bit about there. It's really easy to read. Those two, go look at them. They have more information. Those are my main two sources. They have really good factual information and research, and I'm not as good at that. They're amazing. It's very much similar, because with the water lilies, they don't have a horizon. It's just kind of this like endless sea of water lilies. They don't have a vanishing point. They do not have like this scale. It's just water lilies. It's like looking into a swamp, but that's all you see is the swamp, but prettier. Because it's like, that's what you see. You don't see anything else. There's nothing in the main forefront of these images. Like, there might be trees and plants, but there's no horizon, there's no sky, there's no something to look out to, and it's supposed to imitate the trench warfare. Because of that, I find it so fucking cool that because of that, it imitates like when the soldiers were in their trench warfare. If they looked out into no man's land, there was nothing. It was wet, it was muddy, there was barbed wire, there were bullet casings, there was dead bodies. It was this horror scene of, there's no positives here. And I think that's a fascinating thing to showcase in this beautiful way of this, like, it's waterless, it's peaceful, but it's also this kind of feeling of sadness, and like when you really, really look at them, and like doesn't feel happy, a lot of them. And I think that's something that's easy to miss on and not really fully understand. And if you don't know the background, is that it literally was just trench warfare that he was depicting, because he was just showcasing there's no horizon, there's a little bit of hope, like it'll be okay, there's beauty in like this pain and suffering, but there's no hope kind of thing. And I think that's also just fascinating, because he was able to depict that with literally water lilies, and it gives this kind of sad feeling. Painting has just this beautiful sadness to it. It's just like, it's water lilies we're living, but like it's hard. And I think that's what the beauty is for this painting, is that it's not this happy kind of amazing happiness. It's this like dark depth of, we're here, we're doing great, things are getting better, it's gonna be okay, but like nature persists. Nature can be taken over and destructed, and this pain and suffering that these young men had to go through, and France had to go through, and innocent people had to go through, including nature, but it'll be okay. But it's like this sadness and this like heavy depression feeling. And I feel like that's, again, when great artists are able to say nothing but to create something. I have seen this in person, and when I went, I was just in awe. I was just standing there just like, jaw dropped. This is powerful and amazing. I really want to go back again. But truly, I think that's what great art is that it gives a feeling to people. This water lilies are a perfect example. They're pretty. I think the average person, it's accessible to the average person to look at, but then you learn about it and you're able to find out more, and you're like, this is really intense. And like this deep feeling of being seen, I think, is also part of art. And I think in a lot of ways, learning their perspective, I think perspective is such a huge important thing. And I think that showcases why great art takes time and practice and a lot of trial and error to find what works for you. It just takes figuring out your personal style and your personal point of view, and I think the hardest part. And I think that's why getting inspired by other people doesn't have to be bad. I feel like the Impressionists, in my opinion, do a better job of being Not always. I feel like they did steal some stuff definitely from Japan and stuff like that, but I feel like they did a slightly better job than, say, like Picasso. God damn it. He just kind of stole a lot more and stole his aesthetic, and the difference between inspiration and stealing, I think, is a fine line, but finding that fine line is what creates greatness, in my opinion. It was a war memorial. I think he did a really good job. He did a lot of swishing, dabbing, like just influence. He's not like overthinking it. I think art can be overthought, planned over everything, and I think that's why I love Impressionists as much as I do, because the freedom and beauty that can be created through instinct and practice and just knowledge of how to be an artist. And I think that's just beautiful and amazing and really creates, and that's why I'm influenced and do a lot of makeup inspired by Impressionists, because they do such a good job of just having fun with it, I think, and being free and messing up and being bad in some ways and technically not being perfect as a perfectionist. I think it's very healing for me because I'm able to create this beauty and everything without trying to be quote unquote perfect, because having fun and it looks cool. Like, I'm just slathering on some fucking artwork. Most of the time I use one paintbrush for my entire, and this is a paintbrush. This is not an eyeshadow brush, which, listen, I tried looking it up. I saw no evidence that it would hurt me. So this is the base. I'm gonna start with this and then see how it looks when actually, I'm just gonna start with this. We're not gonna see how it looks. We're gonna start adding the rest of it. He used a lot of blues and greens and teals, but there's also a decent amount of white and like a little bit of pink and yellow for the water lilies. I don't think they need this much pink first. It's a little bit. I'm doing one section of the far right section of the, I don't know how to say it. I'm gonna put it on the screen. But I'm gonna be starting the little water lilies. Again, this is the fun of art. You don't need to be good. You just have to have fun and try. So I'm literally just on the same brush that I've been using this entire time, just like mapping out a couple spots where I want the little water lilies. And I think this eye is going to be the right half of the painting, generally speaking, and then the left eye will be the other. Which, is that going to be chaotic? Maybe. Is that going to work well? We'll see. Should I have done maybe 2? This is just one half instead of the entire artwork? Maybe. But where's the fun in that? Where is the fun in that? And again, this is artwork that is meant to see further away. And again, with Impressionist artwork, they look better from a distance and clearer from a distance. Versus with artwork like this, it is seen a lot clearer from this distance versus up close. It looks just kind of a mess. Which is the fun. Again, we are having fun. It's painting. It's not that serious. What's the worst gonna happen? It doesn't look good? Okay. This is really hard to do, I'm gonna be honest. I think I'm gonna take off my recording and I'm just gonna record me doing it, and I'm not gonna say anything. I am done. This is what she's looking like. I'm pretty happy with it. I might add shimmer later, but I'm debating. This is what my palette looks like. She's covered. That's usually what my hands look like. I do in fact, need to use makeup remover on my hand after this before I go out, because otherwise I will get it all over myself, and I'm wearing a white skirt today, and I'm not doing that. I'm not messing with it. Again, only use one brush. You don't need a ton of tools to get good shit. Now, is this brush kind of busted now? For the moment, until I deep clean her. She will be fine. She will survive. I've done this to most of my little paintbrushes that I use for my eye looks. But she's fine. So, basically, Monet did an amazing job on his art piece, especially for these water lilies for this set. They were phenomenal. The scale of them was amazing. Again, he did this until he died. That's when they were able to actually get these pieces, which I think is also fascinating that Clemenceau was able to do the Treaty de Versailles and all of these things, but wasn't able to get these paintings out of the grips of Monet's hands before he died, because that was his finishing life work. And I think that's very bittersweet and very beautiful in a lot of ways, because it was already ready to go. It was finished long before Monet's death, or at least like a decent amount of time before Monet's death. All they had to do was transport the paintings from studio into the museum and then showcase it, clean it up, make sure it's looking at it, refine it. So only a few months later, which would be really fast if they didn't already have all the prep work done. It was very quick turnaround, which was lovely because they were ready to go. So when it was shown to the showcase and was opened up as this big thing, Clemenceau, this was also his final work kind of thing. This was like his finishing piece. This was like his testament and gift kind of as well to the country of France as like, hey, this is for you kind of thing. That was partially the idea. So when they showcased it, he was hoping for a lovely little tribute. When it was opened up, it was actually not well received for like nearly 50 years. They were seen, because of that there was futurism and cubism, that was such a big prevalent art movement that was seen as the future of art. This was seen as an old man. This was seen as boring, especially, which is, I think, it's even more fascinating when you think about how Monet was so controversial, so incredibly. It was seen as like blasphemy in the Parisian art movement, what he was doing. And now his work, which yes, like it's calmed again because of his cataracts, because it's like larger, but the scale of it, but now it's seen as boring in comparison because of what is happening with these other movements at the same time. So I think it's absolutely fascinating that this one artist that was once seen as this great artist, one of a kind type of thing, is now seen as boring. So he was ridiculed, as seen as like, why were they done? I didn't get it. It was not seen as anything. It was just seen as the Impressionists were boring, and they've gotten boring. I think that's just fucking insane. And so it was showcased a few months after his death in 1926. So it's probably 1927 that it was, like spring of 1927, that it was displayed and opened up to the public. Like 2 years later, Clemenceau actually died. So he also did not see the success. Monet didn't see his pieces shown because he wasn't done with them. And Clemenceau never saw the success to it because he only saw the ridicule, because it wasn't seen as a success, because it was boring and not interesting and no one understood it. And they were like, listen, I'm gonna look at all of these other great artists. Even Dadaism was happening at the same time, and these great, very intense, very thought-provoking, where this was just seen as boring. And I think it's because it's an understated, not in your face type of thing. It wasn't actually until later in the 1950s, like decades later, that it actually became seen as this great art piece. It wasn't until the abstract impressionists of like the 1950s, like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko, both of them saw these exhibits and fell in love with it, were deeply affected and deeply influenced by it. But until that point, it was still seen as a failure and boring when these abstract impressionists from America, because at this point America really became the new, like New York became the new Paris. For like generations, Paris was seen as this pinnacle of art, that if you want to be an artist, you have to go to Paris, you have to go to Montmartre, you have to study there, especially for like a good 100 years, like with the Impressionists and with the Post-Impressionists and with all of the abstract and Cubist and Dadaism and all of these artists. They were all based in Paris. Pre-World War II, that was kind of like the whole mentality. And then a lot of these artists moved to New York during the World War II for protection. New York kind of became this new epicenter for art movements. And so these artists were congregated in New York. And so when they came to Paris, because that was still a thing to do, because there was so much great art in Paris, when they went there, they saw these water lilies and were just moved by it. Because again, it's something you need to see in person. And so they saw it and then we were moved by it. And then that's when they were like, popularity came back around, was long after the death of Monet, after he died and passed away years and years and years later, after Clemenceau also died. Then that's when it really became this popular thing of like, this is a great piece of art, this is a great exhibit. Because of that, it was then seen as a great art piece, which ever since then, it's still seen. It's continuously seen as this great piece and a great important spot to go. Like when I ever went to Paris with my family, when I was able to like go wherever I wanted, the L'Orangerie was on the top of my list. I wanted to go there. I wanted to see the L'Orangerie because it's such an pinnacle museum in Paris, and for anyone who enjoys art. And I think that's so beautiful that it's so many artists aren't seen as, honestly, few and far between. I feel like the amount of recognition artists will get in their lifetime versus after. And I think that's a very bittersweet thing of, I'm glad their artwork's on, but also I'm sad that their great pieces doesn't always seen as great pieces in their time. They're not able to see it. It's this weird combination, because I feel like it could also, I think there's some artists that can go to your head and also kind of create worse art because you are trying to impress people versus trying to impress yourself. So it's this weird like dichotomy that kind of creates this perfect storm in a lot of ways, but it's also sad, but it's fascinating. It wasn't until then, and now it's still, to this day, again, it's seen as this great art piece that everyone is sought after. But I'm gonna go finish my makeup and then we'll finish this up. This is the finished look. She's looking cute. Just did a dark green mascara. Honestly, do fun mascaras. They're the easiest way to have fun with your makeup. And you will get compliments. I get complimented on my mascara choices. Honestly, sometimes more than my eye makeup. Now you know a little bit more about Monet's water lilies, specifically his pieces in his later part of his life for the L'Orangerie in Paris, France. It's a beautiful collection. It's definitely one of those things that it feels a lot flatter in images than in person. It's way more impactful. I feel like with art in general, the more you know the background, the better it is. And although I have friends and people in my life who are just like, I like it because it's pretty, and that is a completely valid take. That is a completely 100% full thought out take, but it is also fun to know why. So thank you and have a wonderful day. Mwah. Bye.